All right, welcome back to Sooner Surge, guys. Tonight, I got Tristan Lundy here from college football recruiting analyst for FC Prospects, and just gonna chat a little bit recruiting. It's been hot on OU side with Stone committing this last weekend, and just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about obviously the defensive line, Tristan, with the Stone commit. Just how big is that for OU as far as even finishing out the class with others?
Yeah, I think it's massive. I think especially with OU moving into the SEC in 2024, I think that building that defensive line, building the core is going to be a key piece for y'all going into the SEC. I think Stone, everyone saw him on ESPN the other day. He looked great. He looked even better than people thought he would from last year. So
Mhm.
I think those defensive line pieces are huge for y'all moving into the SEC.
Yeah, what about? I mean, we all seen the McKinley buzz, man. I mean,
Right.
it's the last 24 to 36 hours. It's really heated up. Just kind of, what are you hearing on that end, and just maybe has Stone impacted that recruitment?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of inevitable to say that Stone hadn't affected that recruitment because everyone going into it, he has a crystal ball going to Texas. Everyone kind of thought it was he was going to go to Texas, and then A&M kind of came in there, and then here recently, like you said, the last 24, 36 hours, it's been pretty much an OU heavy push. And in the beginning, I feel like it was an OU lean as well. And then
Yeah,
as the recruitment went on, I feel like, there was just some smoke and screens in there. But I think now it's Oklahoma and A&M. I think it'll stay that way throughout the week. But I'm feeling really good about OU going into Friday.
Yeah, Todd Bates posted the "You won't guess who's coming next" right after
Right.
Stone committed to OU. Was Dom McKinley kind of who you thought was going to be that guy, possibly
I
initially?
hundred, I 100%, uh, I 100% do. I also think that can, that can also translate. I think they could be bringing in a big defensive line class this year. I think that
yeah.
Stone, I think McKinley, and I also think Danny Okoye, an edge rusher, number one out of Oklahoma. I think that he is I think that he's heavy in OU lean as well. And also, Williams Nwaneri is still up for grabs to flip him back until December. So it's going to be a long route, I feel like.
Yeah, Tristan, did were you ever maybe in doubt for Oklahoma, obviously with all the Miami buzz, to land David Stone, and now have you seen maybe like, as you know, David Stone, he's such an attractive personality. Players want to come play with them. So
Right.
maybe like, how have you seen him with the way he's affecting some players that Oklahoma is currently targeting?
Yeah, I can be honest. The Miami buzz at the end, it had me a little concerned. I was saying, well, I'm just not sure because it was all this, and then it was crystal ball this, and then, but I think all of that, kind of like with the Colin Simmons thing to LSU, and then he went to Texas. I think it's kind of just a hype thing. I think
Mhm.
that might have been a behind the scenes thing that was already kind of said and done, him going to OU. I mean, like I said previously, I think that a David Stone type player committing to your school is going to impact especially the position group that he's in.
Yeah.
But I think that it attracts high level players throughout the nation at any position.
Yeah, and we've Tristan, we've talked on here. We had Danny Okoye on here as well, and he seems his upside seems to be maybe even more than some of these. He just has a tremendous athletic ability. I know you've spoken with him some, but it seems to be kind of OU Tennessee. We're hearing maybe some things like that. But yeah, talk to us just a little bit about Okoye and what you've just seen from his play and things like that.
Yeah, like you said, his upside is massive, and for him to be the number one player in Oklahoma, I don't feel like he gets near the hype that he should.
Yeah.
I think that he's a next level player. I think that his heart is in Oklahoma. I see him staying there. Tennessee and all and schools like I don't think LSU is big into the race. I think that it's pretty narrowed down. But yeah, I think that he's a player throughout this season, throughout his senior season. I think that his stock will rise greatly, as it should.
Yeah, he makes his visit this weekend to
Right.
Norman on Saturday, so his official visit. So should be a big weekend there for Okoye there, and hopefully. Do y'all remember when this Tennessee visit? I'm trying to remember when that one is.
September 30th.
Yeah, the South Carolina game.
Okay.
Tristan, what about Terry Bussey talk? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Terry Bussey fan. I'm about the biggest Terry Bussey fan there is. He's an extreme athlete. I think that he is one of the best players in the class. I mean, I know he's the number one athlete, but he's extremely, I think, overlooked too. He's great talent. I think that one's going to be an Oklahoma A&M battle. Honestly, I see him leaning towards A&M personally.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, just like all the other recruitments, I think OU will make a push late. I think that they'll make it a battle for A&M. But I have heard that there is family ties to A&M with him. I think possibly a cousin or a girlfriend or something of that nature. So those things do play a factor. So that I think his commitment date is set for September 26th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and for Oklahoma to land Terry Bussey, that would be just really as of what we've seen from Emmett Jones in the cycle, right? They already have 5 receivers committed. You would expect Terry Bussey to play receiver, so that'd be 6. But I don't know how familiar you maybe are with OU's offensive line targets, but as you know, Bill Bedenbaugh, he's starting to get his list out there to 3 extremely talented guys in Eddie Pierre-Louis, Jordan Seaton, and Grant Brake. So maybe if you could speak on any of them.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm not exactly as tuned into that as I am the other ones. I will say this just to add a comment onto that. I think that, like I said about the defensive line, the offensive line is also just as important going into the SEC for Oklahoma. I think building a big, good offensive line, which I feel like y'all have had a good offensive line for quite some time, have had some really good players come out of Oklahoma. So I think that as long as that continues, I think that y'all be in very good shape.
Yeah, you mentioned a few times so far tonight about the late pushes that Oklahoma's making,
Right.
particularly on these 5-star guys. So
Right.
really, what is it? Like, how is OU able to kind of get back into the race when it looks like heading into the commitment dates that they're kind of out on the outside looking in?
And, I think that stems from the fact that a lot of these kids that are coming back to OU at the commitment date for those late pushes are initially OU favorites. They're initially big OU guys, and then throughout that commitment, teams will come in and, there's talks about NIL this, NIL that, but nobody really knows what all that consists of. But I think that, I think that a lot of it's just smoke and screens, like I said before. But I think that OU is a top-notch program in the country, and I think that they're never really out of a commitment or really out of a recruitment ever. So I think that that's what it is. A lot of these kids are big OU guys, and later on they're going to reconsider that.
Yeah, Tristan. So maybe as you've talked to some of these other OU targets or current commits, what have maybe you've heard from people or been told that's making Oklahoma stand out to some of these other players, and whether that's in the state of Florida or Texas or just really any guy that's committed to Oklahoma?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a multitude of things. I think that, I've mentioned the SEC multiple times. Who doesn't want to play in the SEC, especially at Oklahoma, which has had a ton of success in the Big 12. So that's another one. They're known for having success. They're known for producing NFL talent. And another thing, I think that y'all have a really good coaching staff at multiple layers, multiple position coaches. I mean, they're good guys. They know how to connect with the players. They have a history of doing great things. Um, I think honestly a big part of it's the coaching staff that y'all have now. They're very, very good at recruiting.
Hey, Tristan, McKinley.
Yes, sir.
So obviously, number one player out of Louisiana. Those guys don't get out of Louisiana that often,
Right,
especially at defensive tackle, right? And
right.
so, just I know, just with LSU, kind of what do you think the reasons why that they're not being more considered in that recruitment?
Yeah, I think I'm not really sure. You're right. A lot of the times those players, like you said, defensive linemen, even just defensive in general, they
Mm-hmm.
usually don't leave the state. They usually
Yeah.
stay there. They play for LSU and they represent the state. I think that that's kind of I think that it's just the interest factor. I think that OU made a push early on to really show him that they wanted him. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if LSU showed that same desire, and I think that might have had a big factor.
Yeah, could you kind of like tell our viewers, obviously, what you can say on how OU, like, kind of everything that transpired over the past few days with Dom McKinley, on how OU kind of got back into that race where it's not as much of a Texas lock as everyone believed as of last weekend?
Right. I mean, I think that uh, some of it is, you know, when the kid starts talking and doing interviews, you kind of start to kind of see where his mind's at. I think that another reason, I mean, I think that, at the end of the day, kind of like I said, I think that OU was a favorite for kind of most of his recruitment, if I recall correctly. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
and,
true.
and so I think that, it was, and the only people that I feel like really were believing that he was a lock to Texas were Texas people. Everyone else from the outside kind of was thinking, well, maybe A&M, maybe Oklahoma. So I don't know. I think that he was kind of an Oklahoma lean all the way. I think that it was just bluff.
Yeah, and obviously, like we talked about earlier, with when Stone commits last Saturday,
Right.
even if your mind is leaning Texas at that point, I mean, because
Hmm.
you get a defensive tackle next to you, and it's David Stone. It's really going to affect your game too.
Right. And also, I mean, I see a bunch of Oklahoma fans saying this, and I truthfully believe it. No recruitment's over until December.
Yeah.
And I think that Williams Nwaneri is still very much,
Yep.
in the talk. So we also have to affect that. We also have to look at Nigel Smith, and I'm not super informed on him, but it's looking like I know that Ohio State's up there, I believe, and Oklahoma and Penn State's up there. So that one's a little iffy for me. I'm not too sure on, but I mean, who wouldn't want to play with that defensive line group?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he seems, just from the OU side of things, OU seems a lot more confident in Nigel Smith, or they had seemed a lot more confident in landing Nigel Smith than they did, I think, McKinley, just from the OU people. And so that's why I think when the Bates video went out, a lot of people were like, well, he can't be talking about Smith because OU feels pretty comfortable with that recruitment. So that's why I think earlier, like we were talking about, I think that the Bates video, I really do think that's probably McKinley.
Yeah, and like we talked about previously, who wouldn't, when David Stone puts that hat on ESPN, who wouldn't want to go play for him and Todd Bates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard it's hard to say no to that, really. So
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Tristan. Go ahead.
no.
I was gonna. You talked about Tristan, the kind of nothing's over till December, and I know Brent Venables. He kind of got a commitment policy that's a little different than other programs. Where a guy took a visit and it's like, well, that the policy kind of that has been, I guess, conveyed, and I don't know exactly what it all entails, but we've heard of it. We even asked Okoye about that policy. It seems to be a little different than other schools as far as, once they're committed to OU, it seems to be more of a kind of lockdown thing. Have you heard anything on that? Or
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure of what that entails necessarily. I have, I mean, when you look at it from face value, you definitely can see that. I'm not sure exactly what that's from. I don't know if y'all even have any intel on that you could give me, but no, I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, the policy really is last year they had a few guys take visits elsewhere while they were committed. Anthony
Evans.
Evans, yeah, and then Colton Vasek with
And
Texas,
also
Evans with
Ashton
Georgia.
Colbert as well.
Yeah, that's another one. So really, he just kind of made it. You're committed. You're no longer visiting anywhere else, and if you are, you're no longer an OU commit at that point. There's been a few guys that learned that the hard way. There was a JUCO guy, defensive lineman. I'm blanking on the name. That
Defensive end,
yeah, he committed OU and then visited Illinois right after committing, so he lost his spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that law schools struggle with is losing kids during the season. So if that policy can be effective for that coaching staff, I definitely think that would be the way to go.
yeah, I know you are very following of Texas high school football as well. Eli Bowen, it seems like OU it was a lock that he was going to be there because of his brother. But what are they getting in a guy like Eli Bowen? Is he underrated or underappreciated, you think?
I think in some ways, yes. I think in some ways he's a tad bit underrated. I think that he's an extreme athlete. I think that he's going to put on some weight too, put on some muscle when he gets to OU. I mean, I'm not super, I didn't follow him super hard during high school, but I mean, a lot of these kids that are, they're good players. They're just getting overlooked. They're not getting the appreciation of some other guys just depending on where they're at and where they commit to also, which that really drives me nuts. So I think that he's going to be a good kid. I think he's a good kid, and I think that he's got a really high ceiling. So
Yeah, and I think with Eli Bowen, it's kind of just his football IQ and his ability to play the ball, I think, is what makes
exactly.
him stand out a lot. And I honestly think he's one of the more underrated players in all the country. And the reason why I think he's underrated is because he's 5'9", right? I mean, I believe the last Jim Thorpe Award a winner in college football was 5'9" or 5'10". So it's not like these shorter players can't do it. But, I mean, you look at his brother that's at OU and Peyton Bowen, he's only 5'10", 5'11", probably.
Right.
And they both are extremely good players. So I think maybe his height underappreciates him. And him maybe getting overlooked a lot last year at Denton Guyer with guys like Jackson Arnold and Peyton Bowen. But, I think that if Eli Bowen gets a chance to go to some camps, he's going to rise majorly in the rankings.
100%.
Well, and hey, you mentioned Okoye earlier about being kind of like he's not talked about as much as he should be as the number one player in Oklahoma. And I totally agree. And, I think I even asked him when he came on about because he plays for Noah and maybe the competition isn't as tough as like you look at Carl Albert, who's just loaded with D1 players, and you hear a lot about them. But Okoye kind of, like you said, but then when he goes to these camps or whatever, he just dominates, and it's just crazy that some of these kids that they just don't get talked about as others. It's crazy.
Yeah, and also, I mean, and that kind of I feel the same way about Terry Bussey, even though he is the number one overall athlete. He plays at a smaller 3A school in Texas. I've watched him play in person. He plays my local team every single year in the preseason. I mean, he is insane athlete, and it's just the hype around people, and all the kids that have the hype deserve it. I just feel like there should be a little bit more splashed around.
Yeah, Terry Bussey, I've heard some people kind of throw him into that conversation as one of the best Texas high school football players of all time, like after last year's 80 touchdown season.
100%. He is kind of like when you watched Kyler Murray play back when he played at Allen. It was kind of that it factor.
Yeah, for sure.
He's like an extreme athlete, and I think there's kind of a guy I want to ask you about out of Texas, and I don't know how familiar you are with him. He's committed to Oklahoma. He's not talked about a lot, and a guy in Dozie Ezekoma. I'm not very familiar with his game, so maybe if you're familiar with him, if you follow his recruitment and kind of who he is as a player.
Yeah, not super hard. Is he a defensive back by chance?
He's a receiver, right, Hunter?
Okay.
Yeah, he's committed to OU as a receiver. I'm sure he plays both ways in high school.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, I'm not super I've heard of his name for sure. I definitely, kept up with him a little bit. I haven't watched much film on him necessarily, so I can't give you too much insight on him.
Yeah, well, Tristan, man, thanks, man, for taking time to join us tonight. It was nice to chat with you. I have to do it again for sure. But appreciate you coming on tonight, taking some time, and we'll see what happens Friday with Dominick McKinley.
Yes, sir. It's going to be exciting. I appreciate all of y'all for having me on and, giving me a platform to speak some of the knowledge that I have. So hopefully we can do it again.
Will do, man. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Tristan. Appreciate
All right.
it.
Y'all.